Hi, everyone. Pastor Galen, lead pastor at Shine Hills Church. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. We hope that these podcasts will be a real encouragement to you on your spiritual journey. You can also connect with Shine Hills at shinehills.org. Hope you enjoy the program.
We are across the street and around the world. Shine Hills.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. Nathan, welcome. Glad you're here.
Good to see
Glad
you.
you stuck around for another half hour or whatever, 20 minutes is what we do. We try to hit that because that's the optimal time. Do you know that? People have the attention span for 22 minutes.
Oh, man.
And then boom, it's off.
Many days I'm like 22 seconds, so I'm glad for them.
So this is, no kidding. We got to be animated enough. But I want to start off with the scripture, okay?
Oh, yes.
So it goes like this. This is Hebrews chapter 10, verse 35. And it goes like this. Therefore, do not throw away your confidence, which has great reward. And there's another version of this that I just thought it was just kind of interesting. It says this, so don't lose your courage that you had in the past. Your courage will be rewarded richly. We talk about courage around here a lot.
Right.
Be strong and courageous, right? We talk about the courage it takes to really talk about these issues of our day, and it's not for the faint of heart.
Right.
Well, okay, so here's a question that I have, and this is, I don't know, everything is controversial these days, so I don't want to mean to be controversial, but there's always since I've been in seminary, I've had this awareness of the difference between secular humanism and the Christian faith, Christian religion. Right. And these are opposing views. Secular, meaning, it's, kind of on the street, or secular is just in the group of thought within a body of people that aren't necessarily Christian or Jewish. It's secular. I guess that's where that comes from. The Bible talks about Jew and Gentile. So the Gentiles are the outsiders. The secular would be outside of the faith, I would say, is what I would describe secular. Humanists, the way I see humanism is that's basically saying that man is the center of the universe.
Right.
Basically, man is God. Is that too so strong to say that?
Exactly. It's really set itself up as anti-theistic.
Okay.
So the question is whether it's truly secular or if secularism today has become a religion of its own.
Yes.
And I think that's something worthy of debate because there are many indications, and we see them all over the place, where it has become a religion unto itself.
Yeah, that's right. And I think this shows up in our schools. I think it shows up in our school systems. I think it's this idea, because I've always had this thought, and really for a long time, that this idea that that schools have to be non-religious. Well, it's really impossible to teach, because you're either going to serve out of a secular humanistic that God or man is the center, or that God is the center. And we see this on full display when it comes to marriage or gender identity or those kind of things. And a theistic view of this is going to say, no, we believe that there is male and female. A secular view of this would say gender is fluid, right? And so you can't, these two ideas clash.
Right.
And whenever the church brings these up as that, okay, here's a clash here, here's a difference, then that's when I get accused of being political or whatever like that.
Right.
What's your thoughts on this debate, and how big of a deal is this in our day to day?
Well, it is big. And it has been for some time. We have to point back. You go back for decades. But what has changed the conversation more and more, especially the last 7 years, since the 2015 Obergefell decision, which legalized same-sex marriage?
Okay.
There's been a whole new wave pushing an idea that men and women are men and women based upon some sort of fluid scale.
Okay.
And so as a result of that, that is making a very clear worldview statement, is making a statement based purely on faith. And so secularism today has taken on a kind of faith aspect, a kind of religious aspect that is totally different.
More so than ever before.
More so than ever before.
Because of issues that are, affect us, like the gender issue. Is that why you think that is?
I really think so, because the sexual revolution, when it began in the 1960s, initially it was just the free sex culture. And so the sexual revolution didn't try to make a claim that that sexuality was somehow fluid. It basically was just saying that there should be no restrictions.
Right. Right.
But the last less than a decade really has changed the entire context for the first time, I think, in human history. You have found people. So you go backwards in history, like in ancient Greece with Greek love or the Theban band or a lot of those different things, where there was homosexuality and pederasty. They never once claimed that they were somehow capable of changing their sex per se. Your sex was not an idea; it was actually biological and self-evident as a truth.
Okay.
And so today there's a new aspect of all of this that is very religious, and this crept up just recently in New York State.
Now, when you say, just a second, when you say
Yeah.
religious, you're saying it's in a secular humanistic way.
That's right,
Right. But they're making a religion
right.
out of that. So what makes it, why does it tap into religion? Why does it, what's the difference?
Well, let's look at the trappings. So what they would say is that they're not a religion, of
Right.
course.
That's
And
what
yet
I've heard forever.
You look at their training programs.
Okay.
Oftentimes what they'll do is they'll bring, this happened at the University of Wyoming within the last month.
Oh, wow.
They had an individual that got up in front of all of the new freshman students, and they wanted them to keep this quiet. And they said, hey, you're going to do a lot of sexual exploration while you're here, and started talking about all these different aspects. Now, mind you,
Wow.
we're sending our children. Now, thankfully, there were some really good people on the University of Wyoming School Board and others that immediately began to push back.
Okay.
But the idea that people would do that. So what we have is a training institution where some equity, diversity, and integration, or whatever they call that, individual will get up and begin to push a worldview clearly in opposition not only to biology, but to the vast majority of people in this country, and they're
Right.
pushing an agenda.
Yeah.
And so when we look at the training institutions, secondly, you have them attempting in social media and other things to excommunicate folk. Okay, we call that shaming. You know, they are banning.
Right.
But that banning culture is essentially the secularist way that they go about excommunicating people from public life.
You're voted off the island. So to speak.
Absolutely.
You're out. You're out. Okay.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Then you look at the basis of the claims. They'll try to put all of these trappings of deep thought around it. But when you look at the core of the statements they're making, they are faith-based. They're not based in evidence and biology.
Okay.
And
All
so
right.
that is the reason why I believe one can clearly say that secular humanism has all of the trappings of a non-theistic religion.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so the difference is you and I clearly believe in God. We're part of a theistic religion, but we're very open about it.
Yeah.
And we're very clear about it. And not only that, everything that is said in the Christian church going back 2,000 years is open for the whole world to see, and it's the most studied aspect in human history.
Right.
And so you can study everything we're saying. What they're trying to do, though, is make almost the same kind of claims and bury it under the idea that it's not a religion. I would just claim, though, on the opposite hand, that it is a non-theistic religion.
That is. I totally agree with you. I never thought of it as kicking it up a notch because of the gender fluidity. But I'm going to go back to that speech. So our freshmen are going in there, and at University of Wyoming, and someone in the somewhere in the diversity department. What did you call it?
So I don't know exactly. I just heard about this in the last 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
And thankfully, there were a number of people on our University of Wyoming Board of Trustees that said, "Listen, this is not what we do here."
Yeah, good.
But we have to actually back those people when they make those.
No kidding.
When they stand up, they're standing up on our behalf.
For sure they are.
And so
And
I'm
on the
appreciative.
hearts and minds of our kids.
Right.
I've often said, it's like, we do the very best we can in church and youth and everything else. And you're right. When we put something on the board, it's not secretive. We say, here's what we believe God says about male and female, about marriage and about morality. Here's the ideal, right? And we, for all to see, for all debate, whatever you want to see, and we hold this ideal up publicly. To think that this is actually brought to the fore kind of privately and nobody knows about, or, I don't think they had informed the parents that, hey, by the way, we're going to tell your kids that they're going to be sexually active and we're going to give them our worldview. That's, I don't know what word is that, despicable or something like that. That's how I feel about it.
I know. And it really is frustrating. So we have seen them now actually come after religious institutions.
Yeah.
And this hit the national news in the last 2 weeks. There is an institution in New York City that it's called Yeshiva University.
Sounds Jewish.
It's very Jewish.
Yeah.
It is a Jewish theological training school. So in the Christian tradition, we would just call it a seminary.
Yeah.
That's literally what they are. Now, in 1970, they determined that they would try to, in the state of New York, they were told they have to either choose to be a religious institution or an educational institution. They actually chose to call themselves an educational institution, but what they do is they still teach religious topics. It's never been an issue until very recently.
Okay.
And here's what happened. An LGBTQ plus club came in and said, we want to start at Yeshiva University. Now, if you could imagine this, you're a graduate of Dallas Theological. I'm a Shepherd's Theological, their sister school.
Yep.
I'm working through there. And imagine if an LGBTQ club said, we want to start here. Now, we personally and the institutions that we come from are very clear that we are biblically based.
Right.
And the Bible's clear that we speak the truth in love.
Right.
But the Bible is clear that God created male and female. In the image of God, he created them.
Right.
Literally male and female. And so it would be opposite of biblical truth if someone were to do that. Now, Yeshiva University believes the same thing. But they were told that by a New York state judge that they would have to start this LGBTQ plus club.
Wow.
Now, it was very wrong. Almost everyone understands that's wrong. So what they did is they appealed straight to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, there's a means to do that. I don't know that it's advisable, but there's a means to do that. And Justice Sotomayor actually did put an injunction, a temporary hold. She has that opportunity because she's over that district.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
So she put an injunction and then took it to the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court turned it back to the state and said, listen, there's some things that have to fall into place before it comes to us. You need to work through the system. But they also indicated that they would absolutely overturn such a horrible decision by a judge like that.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I found this very interesting, and it's important for us as Christians that
because that's knocking on the door of the church next.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
And that's exactly what Rabbi Ice, he's one of the professors there at the institution. He wrote in their journal, and he wrote something so powerful. I'd like to read it for you.
Yeah.
He wrote this. He said, he asked this question: how will liberalism continue to pose problems for Yeshiva University? And the title of his article was "The Danger of Liberalism and Why Yeshiva University Should Change Its Charter." He goes on and says this is powerful. Proponents of liberalism describe it as a secular, neutral, universal, and based on human reason. This is sleight of hand, since liberalism begins with certain assumptions and is therefore not based on pure reason. It is not universal and makes important claims about what is right and wrong. And this, by the way, is very consistent with Orthodox Christianity, which is what you and I believe, and what the church has believed for millennia.
Yeah, for sure.
He then goes on and says, on issues related to the definition of gender, the importance of marriage, the definition of marriage, the importance of raising children in the nuclear family and duties to parents, liberalism takes a side. In a strong biblical society, liberalism can give the appearance of neutrality. However, with Christianity on the wane in America and without biblical resources to strengthen the healthy moral values of the family, we live in a society of unfiltered liberalism, and it functions as a religion.
And that's just what you've been saying.
That's powerful.
That really is. That's exactly right. That's secular humanism as a religion.
Right.
Liberalism is
and what
embedded
he's saying,
in there. Yeah.
Right. What he's saying, that when we talk about it as a religion, he's saying it's making important moral claims as to what is right and what is wrong.
Exactly.
Now, people always accuse religion of that. Now, ours is deeply rooted in the most ancient text in all of history.
Right.
And yet, at the same time, they're making the same claims and then claiming that they're not making those claims on a religious basis.
Yeah.
And what we're saying is that is hypocritical.
Right.
That's wrong. And
Because
so
you're saying what's right and wrong, and you're saying it's not religion. It's I don't know what they call it. Then
right.
What do they call that? Just a liberal point of view.
Right, a worldview. And that's the reason why
maybe.
many theologians and apologists today have gone in to describe worldview. So they don't talk about religion as much. They do, of course, but they talk about worldviews.
Because religion is assuming that we're putting God's
Right.
word into the equation. Is that right?
Exactly.
That's what I would say.
I've even thought of writing an article on this and entitling it simply The Neo-Religion.
Yeah.
The New Religion. And it's a religion that is an atheistic, it is a non-deistic, I should say, religion. But I like the way this rabbi continues on in his article, because he's talking about the issue we've just raised. He said, actions and rituals, holidays and symbols, and public statements by religious leaders apply and reinforce this understanding of right and wrong. Liberalism does the same. And here's what he writes. Many aspects of liberal culture are reminiscent of religion. There are liberal holidays, like Gay Pride Month. He goes on to say being fired from one's job or canceled for having the wrong outlook is a form of excommunication bordering on inquisition, which is true.
Yeah.
And its adherents, he says, even calls it a religion. Now, I tried to look at where he was citing from, who calls it a religion. I would love to see that, but it's really important that we understand the challenge that we face.
Mm-hmm.
It's not religion versus no religion. It's not religious commitment versus a supposed secular neutrality. Secularism is decidedly not neutral. That's important. It is transcendent. Theistic religion in some form versus a secular religion, along with all of the accoutrements and all of the moral demands that a religion makes. The secular religion issues commands that are just as demanding as any form of theistic faith.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. So here's what I hear out of this, okay, is that I think a lot of times people think that, okay, I'm liberal or I'm secular or whatever, so I'm just neutral. I'm nothing. I'm neutral. I'm not trying to get into anybody's business anywhere. I'm just this living in the middle of the road.
Right.
Well, what they're doing is what this is saying is they've kicked that up to a notch of saying, no, this middle of the road is a religious right and wrong. And you can't, when you start saying what's right and wrong, you are making yourself into, you're coming in conflict with biblical truth, right?
Absolutely.
And there's a debate there, and they're trying to say, oh no, we're not a religion. And it's like, that makes people feel like, well, I just want to be non-religious about this. Well, you can't.
Right.
You just stepped into a religion, even though you don't realize it. Is that kind of what he's saying here?
Absolutely. I think one thing we have to say is that everyone has a worldview.
Yeah, that's true.
It's reflected sometimes for many, many people. That worldview simply is a worldview of me. I'm the center of the universe.
Humanism.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and it takes on this dangerous component though when people begin to prey on that, and all of this was prophesied years before in Romans chapter 1.
Okay. Yes. Right.
The Apostle Paul says, "For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes have been clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even as eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." Now he's addressing the world at large.
Right.
And he's saying that everyone can clearly see the handiwork of God.
Right.
So people have to come up with a reason to push back against the handiwork of God. And so they wind up developing a religion unto themselves.
Yep.
But the amazing thing is, he even prophesied it in the very next verse, what they would do. Now, he never knew the name Charles Darwin.
Right.
But he said this in Romans 1:21, because though they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. And professing to be wise, they became fools and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like a corruptible man, birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. And so when you look at all of that, look at the way people oftentimes, I saw something sad just the other day on YouTube, and it was a young person singing a song about I love Earth.
Okay. Wow.
Well, it was like singing Jesus Loves Me,
Oh yeah.
but it was a young person singing their religion.
Yeah.
Let's just say it.
Yeah.
We understand it what's in the church.
They're worshiping the created things and not the
Right.
Creator. Yeah,
Right.
For sure.
We're just being very clear and open about it.
Yeah. That's so
So-
that's so good.
Yeah.
Well, and then if you get to the end of Romans 1, it says, and God gave them over to their, basically their depraved minds.
Right.
And I always tell people, it's like, can you imagine coming to the place where God just says, okay, I'm going to give you over to your own thoughts because you've rejected, you've looked out at the planet, you've looked at the oceans, and you've seen the trees, and you've seen the little bugs, and you've seen molecules, and they've seen all this, and your fingernails are growing back. How do you figured this, seen all this, and say, this was just an accident.
Right.
Then
right.
God finally says, I've given you over to your own foolish mind.
Which is a tragedy. Paul
Tragedy. Oh my
he
gosh.
writes this to Timothy. It's found in the book of 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 20. And I think it weighs right into the conversation. He says, Timothy, guard what was committed to your trust. Avoid the profane and idle babblings and contradictions of what is falsely called knowledge.
Yeah.
Now, in the old language, it was called oppositions of science, falsely so called. That word for knowledge and science is essentially the same thing. And there are people that have turned scientism, I think we should call it that, scientism,
Okay.
into a religion of its own.
Yeah.
But the faith-based ideas that they put out there about the origin of the universe, about the origin of man, of all of these different things, and they put together these big theories. And all the way back to 2 millennia ago, almost, the Apostle Paul was saying, listen, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah,
and it's
that's true.
just keep your mind, keep your wits about you.
That's right. Well, I'm going to go back to where we started.
Yeah.
Okay, we started in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 35, and it says this, for you have need of endurance so that when you have, I'm sorry, I read the wrong passage. It's this, therefore do not throw away your confidence, which has great reward. And I think this confidence in God, this confidence in Scripture, it has great reward.
That's right.
And I think a lot of people are on the verge of throwing a whole bunch of things away because of scientism, the new word you made up, because of secular humanism, putting man in the center of your thought process, that everything comes from man, not from God. Instead of a theistic worldview, you have a humanistic worldview. These things are, like you said, they've been prophesied a long time, and we're seeing them in fruition, and they're playing out right in front of us today. It's difficult, and it's sad that a lot of this is being pressed on. I think our youth at probably the most vulnerable time.
That's right.
And it's like they really have to be prepared going into these college years. So, well, as a parent, oh my gosh,
Right.
you got kids at home, and you're trying to do everything you possibly can. I think the idea is you've got to be informed, you got to understand these things, and you've got to have great communication with your kids. Right. Have a good rapport to be able to talk about these things. And I think you need to know your stuff.
That's right.
You need to know Romans 1.
Right.
And I think you need to know Joshua 1, 8, and 9. You need to be strong and very courageous. God bless you guys. Thanks for joining us.